So I'm going to go through, I'll flash up sort of the topics at hand today in the next 25 minutes or so, but it's a pleasure to be here with you today. And hopefully I can share some nuggets that you can take back into your organization. Just a little bit of context about myself before we step in. Been in technology for about a little over 20 years now, starting with BPO, went into SaaS, then went into database, and then now more recently been in the last 2 years with modern application development is how we kind of describe low code. I don't think there's really no code, but as low code application development. So I'm going to walk you through. Really, I think the focus here is around a number of initiatives that we see as patterns and trends within not only just banking, financial services, and insurance, but kind of cross industry. And so today's agenda, what I'm going to hit on for is a couple areas. So I'm going to start with kind of macroeconomic trends quickly, just to set the context for the conversation, because I think it's important to anchor. Get into sort of why low-code application development. So why are many organizations in and outside of financial services and banking adopting this way of developing software? We'll talk a little bit about OutSystems, just because I know we are a European-based company, actually 20 years. And our CEO, Paulo Rosado, actually helped define the low-code terminology with Gartner. So since its inception, we've really focused in on this whole concept of enabling organizations to drive innovation and really control their destinies around developing software. So we'll talk a little bit about OutSystems just to get, and then talk about how we're helping accelerate some of that innovation for clients within your specific industry and beyond. So I think it's pretty clear digital is a priority, but it's for a very good reason. This is just a recent study that I found quite comprehensive that I would urge the audience here to go take a look at from Deloitte in relation to what are those digital pivots here on the left-hand side. And the study was across these 7 pivot areas, I think over 1,200 plus executives, looking at, how are they performing against these relative to their digital maturity. And through that study, they found out that those organizations, obviously represented by those executives, when they've been addressing these 7 areas, at least to some minimum level, or even really focus in on driving some of that digital innovation across these areas, that they're roughly around 2 to 3 times, have a 2 to 3 times a stronger financial performance, right? It probably goes without saying, but I think that's the whole reason why digital transformation, as we think about innovation, is so crucial. So there's a number of things that fall underneath it that I'll fall back into why that's important for this conversation. But at the end of the day, we are an application development platform to drive and accelerate digital transformation or innovation, both inside your financial institutions as well as out to your consumers. And we'll talk a little bit about how we're doing that. So shifting from the broader macroeconomic trends of driving profitability for your respective organizations and competitive market share, if you look on the left-hand side, recent IT spend has gone up, I think, 3.6%. So that's good news for, I think, many, hopefully, people on this call, that there seems to be a reinvigoration around investments. And here on the left are some of the areas of investment. And why that's important is if you look really at 2 areas to point your attention, multi-experience development platforms and the Composable Enterprise. So that's the left-hand side. And we've really fallen into those classifications. Like low code, no code is about visual drag and drop development. Some people think it's really around citizen development. I think that's an extended capability that we can drive, but there's still very much core IT, core DevOps, DevSecOps that are driving more productivity, more throughput through low-code application development with OutSystems. To the right is a really important example. So as you think about the spend and how that's increased, what are those emerging technologies? Because we're really an emerging technology. How are those being adopted and consumed, and where investments are being made? So low-code application development, the market is quite large, and you'll see here why in a second. But that is really in this specific area of investment right now. So the urgency I'm seeing it in daily conversations with large banks, medium-sized banks, insurance, credit unions, investment funds. So across the board, we're seeing more appetite. Now, you look at some of the larger kind of traditional banks have a lot of legacy to kind of kind of figure out, and then you have your more nimble sort of fintech organizations that are able to be more flexible and agile with what they're bringing into the market. But the point here is really investments up, low-code application development is at the center of emerging technology. Companies are still trying to figure out how to bring that and consume that, not only quickly to drive time to market, but also with quality assurance along the way and scale and throughput over time. So a couple of, this is the last sort of statistics. I want to be a consultant if I didn't kind of set the context. So the last one before we start getting into more specifics about OutSystems and some of the challenges we see and we're addressing is there's a couple of areas that I think are important here. There's a talent deficit. So if you're not the Fortune 10, Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies that can recruit and retain top talent, this is a real source of pain for you around preserving and upskilling talent to support what is a very fragmented and very complex ecosystem. Hopefully many of you on this call, that resonates with you, but we're seeing a huge crunch. That drives a lot of demand around low-code application development. Customer experience is really, I would say, I've talked to Ron about this, that's an interlock between employee experience, so employee experience and customer experience or consumer experience. You can't do one without the other, right? So the interlock there is strong. So there's a massive amount of spend and compound annual growth in investments around that area. Emerging technology is top of mind. I speak with many CFOs and CIOs today. I probably spend around 90% of my time speaking with the C-suite and their respective business and technical leaders to try to figure out where low-code fits within their overall strategy. And then proliferation of applications. As we talk about, we're in an experience-driven economy, right? So an application is a means to drive more convenience, more efficiency, and a better overall customer lifecycle management for your respective customers, your partner ecosystem, and then your employees. So based on those factors, to the right, you're seeing a massive opportunity within the subsequent years around low-code application development. They say that, and again, whether this is completely accurate or not, even if it's plus or minus 5%, they say that 65% of all app development will be done on low-code application development platforms. And I think based on what we're seeing from partners and based on what we're seeing from customers, that is holding true. So I think that most recently in 2021, the growth rate was roughly around 40%, and I think the market now is up at approximately around 25 to 30 billion. So what are we seeing? So I'm just sharing a little bit of kind of observations in the field, just given my 2 years at OutSystems and what keeps on popping up. So talent, as I mentioned earlier, it's a talent crunch. You have to drive more productivity, try to swing the pendulum from maintenance and support over to innovation and solving problems. You're constrained by resources, so how do you do more with what you have, or in many cases with the pandemic, with less? And then how do you reduce those hard-to-hire dependencies on certain skills? And extending capabilities, I want to be clear on this. There is no silver bullet. Yes, our platform does extend, and many others do extend to the citizen developer, but we're still seeing core IT being the primary user of this to drive more economies of scale, more productivity, more reusability, and frankly, solving more business problems where IT becomes the innovator with the business and not business asking IT to respond. Time is of the essence, time to market. We'll talk about, obviously, you all know this very well, which is the competitive nature of banking, and that many people will be banking with non-banks, right? So in every sort of source of competition is coming through from different areas of the market. So time is crucial, not only the time to develop, but also the enhancements and continuous integration and development of those applications and maintenance and support of those along the way. Cost is the last one I'll refer to you as. Obviously, that's always top of mind, but we're seeing more and more of a transition where these large expenditures of 3 to 5 years of massive transformation projects are still around, but the customer is pushing, our partners pushing many organizations to drive incremental value quickly. So when you think about rapid prototyping, rapid development, where you're now reducing the life cycle of an application, in some cases from years, months, down to days and weeks, it changes the game and it changes the operating models, right? So there's implications there that have to be considered. So this is some of the best practice to think about. And so when I talked about Composable Enterprise, I talked about multi-experience platforms. When you think about some of what Deloitte refers to as some of the areas where driving digital maturity, ultimately impacting your financial performance as an organization, I found this to be very helpful to just really kind of frame it, right? So as I go through the remainder of the presentation, things to think about is intelligent workflows. That's an area where we fit. Driving unified customer experience, web, mobile, progressive web applications across both internal and external user base. We fit there. Sort of the ecosystem engagement. Obviously, when you think about intelligent business process automation across your corporate functional applications, or even frankly, just the onboarding experience of setting up a new account and the lifecycle management of that customer within your retail or consumer banking platform. That's another area specifically. So some things to think about, and obviously, number one on the list is around having a flexible infrastructure that's secure and scalable. To note, we are a hybrid cloud application solution, so we can deploy in your own private cloud, we can deploy in our private cloud, as well as on-premise. So that's very important for us to have that flexibility on the deployment options. Okay. So Composable Enterprise, I thought I would focus in on this and build it out. This is a big concept that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. It's been around for a while, so I'm probably not sharing anything that's super enlightening, but it's important. This is kind of the whole concept around low-code application development, and I think specifically with OutSystems. Taking the whole concept of point solutions, of building for one solution, and shifting your mindset to building for many, what Gartner refers to as packaged business capabilities. So this is the building blocks, Ron, that we're referring to as far as the Lego pieces. And with a full stack development application platform, you elect to use those components that you wish to drive those solutions. But when you look at your backlog of projects or applications, when you go through your rationalization, and this is something that we will help you with, your ability to look at where there's reuse is crucial. Right? So we're seeing this across many areas where you can actually build several applications and leverage 50, 60% of those components to build the third, the fourth, the fifth, and so on and so forth. And that's really the flywheel effect that we think about with app development. It's not just the speed. The speed is table stakes. Anyone can build fast. How do you make sure you build it right, and how do you make sure it scales and actually supports your business for the future? So I went through that a little bit fast, but I think that's important context setting. So now going into OutSystems. And if Ron, if you want to interject at any point, please do. But this is about giving you the power to innovate. So what we are seeing more and more is that it's not just buy or build. It is buy and build. So we're seeing a continued increase in custom application development, just because there are certain unique factors, within your respective organizations to drive, for instance, your onboarding experience with your customers. Now, there's plenty of commercial products off the shelf, but what we're seeing is that when you drive a connected experience across the enterprise, whether that's in your operations, whether that's in your human capital management internally, or if that's banking as a service, or in your consumer retail experience and life cycle of a customer. So the key thing here is we are giving the power to organizations out there to innovate. And it's an and strategy, not an or strategy. So as I mentioned before, these are core tenets of what we focus in on and why we've have been around for so long and driving enterprise scale across many organizations globally. It's about speed, quality, and scalability and security for the future. So OutSystems, it's headquartered in Lisbon, Portugal. Our America's office is in Boston, right there in Seaport. I'm here based in Washington, D.C., but for those that may have not heard about us, you probably see the Forrester Wave and the Gartner Magic Quadrant and say, who's this OutSystems company? Well, we've been focusing very hard now, recently in the last couple of years, in the Americas marketplace, where we're continuing to see more traction with marquee customers across banking, financial services, insurance, and supply chain and energy and utilities. So a number of key industries within the Americas that we're addressing. But we're a fairly large, stable organization where we have now, I think, over 1,700 customers, a very large global ecosystem, working closely with the large cloud providers as well as with the large GSIs, Deloitte, Accenture, KPMG, Infosys, to name a few. And we've got support across the globe. I'm not going to bludgeon you with this. You can do your research, but we're proven as far as an enterprise-grade platform within this space. I want to be very clear. This is a very saturated space. 250 plus players within the low-code, no-code market. There's a lot of dreams that are being, I guess, proposed as well. So the reality on the ground is that I would urge you to go through the dev experience, a lot of the capabilities that Gartner and Forrester look at when you're looking at low-code application development platforms, and look and map that back to what you're trying to do within your own respective organization. If you're looking at one or two applications, we can support you there. If you're looking at more of a platform approach across your corporate functional internal stakeholders, as well as your consumer-facing or banking as a service applications, we can help there as well. There's a large community out there. I won't stress it. So you will have a lot of support both from OutSystems directly in our partner ecosystem, but from a fair amount of community members. Ron and I were chatting the other day about, you know, the natural resistance that you're going to probably find with your own development or DevOps groups, which the traditional way of C#, .NET, Java are going to be there. At some point, based on those market factors that we saw earlier, the demands are going to have to pivot. So it's not about shifting your entire organization away from traditional development. It's about leveraging low-code application development with OutSystems as an example to be a catalyst to help drive more productivity, burn down the backlog, and ultimately the goal too is to modernize your ecosystem and drive out technical debt. So just a glimpse on some of the customers that we work with across industry. I'll touch on some specific use cases as we get into it, but as I mentioned earlier, we are proven across 22 plus industries in over 70 countries. So the wave is coming. People are trying to figure out, organizations are trying to figure out how to bring this in again and manage it with quality and the right governance and scale. In conversations every day with large banks, as I mentioned, medium-sized banks in the emerging technology division or automation division, or even R&D, where they're looking at different ways to bring in these emerging technologies. As I mentioned earlier, the executives understand that they have to start to pull in emerging technologies to become more mature, to drive better financial results. So how do you do that? And the time is now, as I mentioned, right? The investments are happening now. So what's the platform? As you can probably gather, I am not a developer, and I'm not deep in the technical elements, but I do know that when I've looked and seen how customers interact with the platform, how they develop, and just being on the outside observing, the full stack capabilities really are what drive the differentiation for many customers. When we go in and they actually work and hands-on keyboard with the platform and see what they can build in minutes, days, weeks, it changes the game. The focus of this is the coexistence story that I want to make sure I emphasize, right? This is not about buying or building. This is about buying and building applications, and whatever percentage you choose to build and customize is up to you. But that full stack capability and those Lego blocks lend itself to have flexible deployment methods and flexible architectures to support what it is that you're trying to do, to not only get applications quickly into market, but the continuous enhancement, management, and updates of those applications for a consistent web and mobile brand experience. So full stack from left to right, as I mentioned, full stack capabilities. Integration is key, orchestration is key. Those are two elements we integrate pretty much into anything, and we help orchestrate a connected enterprise across many of your traditional ERP and SaaS solutions that may have constraints or may be super costly to build or customize the way you want to. The full lifecycle management, the DevOps component of this, is we have our methodology that you can leverage from what we do, leveraging the power of the platform, but also we integrate with whatever DevOps practice you have in place. And then it's all about experience, as I mentioned, right? This is about consistent brand experience and making sure that, you know, how your external consumers, your partner ecosystem, and your employee base is interacting with the brand and having that as a consistent experience from front to end. So I know I'm whipping through this pretty quickly. So getting into some of the use cases. So hopefully that starts to move into kind of how you think about potentially looking at low-code application development, and hopefully with OutSystems to bring back into your organization. But we generally will focus across a pretty wide area of digital transformation initiatives. So as I mentioned, consumer-facing or customer experience, workplace innovation, as we know, moving to more a remote workforce. Process automation, we're seeing some pretty specific trends around intelligent business automation, as well as innovation on the edge. So looking at traditional ERP installations that are quite costly to customize, and how do we layer on top and connect into those ERP plus mainframe plus other existing systems of record to drive more engagement, more innovation across your user experience. The app modernization piece is also part of that. That's not generally where we start day one, but what clients are starting to see now is that by leveraging the platform, there's opportunities to retire other systems, other tools, and then ultimately drive down or escape what is the shackles of technical debt, right? Which I think we're all trying to manage as we drive innovation. So here are some of the worst, the use cases that we support. So I won't go through all this, but as it pertains to this particular conversation within banking and financial services, there are some examples that are notable in this, and I'll touch on some of the benefits that we've helped support and enable for some of them. But here are just a few, right? Where the whole onboarding experience, the lead time from, again, days, even sometimes weeks down to minutes, and which that changes the whole game, right, for onboard experience, and then the ongoing mobile and lifecycle management of that customer as they look at their transactions and they look at overall management of their financials. Workplace innovation, you can touch on that briefly, but process automation is another big area. So we're doing transformative work with a number of these financial institutions. A lot of activity out there in the marketplace, but still there's folks are trying to figure out how they bring this in and make sure that they're not compounding technical debt and they're not driving more shadow IT, as some will refer to it, right? That this doesn't become on the shelf in months or in a year because it's not being adopted at scale or governed in the appropriate way. So a couple of examples as I wrap up here in the next couple of minutes, but I think it's important. So I won't read through all the details, but the first one was pretty interesting, an omni-channel banking solution for a large SaaS provider that supports a number of mid-sized banks. Being able to re-architect a digital banking UI within probably 5 months, when traditionally that would take them years to do. And as I mentioned earlier, the reusability of that and how they configure and reuse, not just initially to get the refactored or new product into the market, but how do they enhance that continuously based on user feedback and improvements around driving the right consumer banking experience. And then byproduct of that is obviously faster implementations and sales as a result. The second one's quite interesting, the large fund management company that built a cloud-based platform designed and administered, as I mentioned, around this life cycle. So setting the controls around the documentation, some of the mundane tasks that are happening within the corporate functional areas or different users that are supporting your the consumer or the retail customers, driving more functionality, faster development, as I mentioned. So speed gives you more opportunity to drive more throughput and also reduces costs along the way. But then implementing that quickly and making sure you're driving that competitive advantage, which at the end of the day is what we're trying to do, is drive competition, not only survive, but thrive in the marketplace. And then the last one on the application modernization. So as a result, this other large retail bank in the Americas selected OutSystems to drive core systems modernization and then driving a tremendous amount of adoption with their partner ecosystem. And as I mentioned earlier, reducing the lead times from days down to minutes. So as we wrap up here, a couple of things to highlight. So when we look at low code, no code, which I think is a bit of a marketing term, there is no such thing as no code. It's about visual drag and drop of development with business components. Speed is important, quality is, if not more important, around how do you drive quality around the assembly process and generation of that code. And when you have a varied skill set, how do you harness those C#, .NET, Java developers and manage that quality assurance to drive more reusability, right, for other projects and other applications. And then stability through that code, as well as maintenance and support in the future, and obviously security along the way. So making sure you're not compounding the sprawl, but make sure you're reducing that and governing that in the appropriate manner. So I'll leave you with a couple of things here, and I think I'll wrap up as far as this is your IP, right? That's the one thing. There's many folks tout no vendor lock-in, but you have the ability to actually transpose that code and elect not to run it on OutSystems in the event you do change your strategy as how you want to innovate software. But the scale is important. The pixel perfect UI UX is also crucial. That assembly process, how you patch and update that across many applications. Again, remember the packaged business solutions, like how do you update across many versus one, reducing your management and support cost around supporting all those different applications. A couple of things that we see of areas of or specific initiatives, what we call the digital decoupling. So looking at your traditional ERP and SaaS solutions, where we can be the glue or the blocks that help bring that together. And then intelligent business process automation, where you look at RPA plus process mining plus low-code application development, leveraging AI and ML to drive a more connected enterprise and ultimately not only just drive efficiencies, but also unlock revenue bottlenecks that may be inhibiting your growth. And we can help. There's different program work streams that we support in combination with our large partner ecosystem and your teams to figure out, again, if you're looking at this and you've made the commitment to move forward with a low-code application development platform, you're just trying to figure out where to start and how big do you go, we can help with that. So we have entry points for more small bite sizes consumable offerings, and then we have larger options as well. But in any event, we can support you in that evaluation and in that process, and really look at understanding what your digital transformation initiatives are, understanding those high impact projects and heat map around application complexity and value, business value, and then tie financials around that, what that would mean for your organizations as you look to drive transformation in the future.